The piercing scream cut through the elegant Manhattan restaurant like shattered crystal, silencing conversations worth millions and freezing champagne glasses halfway to lips. 7-year-old Chiara Bianchi sat rigid in her chair, hands pressed against her ears, eyes squeezed shut as terror consumed her small frame. Her father, Luca Bianchi, the man who controlled half of Brooklyn's docks, reached toward her desperately, his powerful hands trembling with helplessness. "Chiara, please!" His voice cracked, the same voice that commanded respect from judges and fear from enemies. But the child only screamed louder, her body shaking as she stared at the empty chair beside her, the chair where her mother should have been sitting, where she would never sit again. Security moved closer. Wealthy diners whispered behind napkins. The maitre d' sweated through his expensive suit. In 2 years since his wife's death, Luca had faced down rival families, federal investigations, and corporate takeovers. But his daughter's grief? It brought him to his knees every time. Then, from behind the glass wall of the open kitchen, a woman in a white chef's coat moved with quiet purpose. Sabrina Keller had spent her life turning pain into sweetness, transforming broken pieces into something beautiful. She recognized that scream. It was the same sound she'd made at 9 years old when her mother disappeared for 3 days, leaving only a vague note on the kitchen table. Setting down her pastry bag, Sabrina did something no one else dared. She walked directly toward the most dangerous man in New York and his screaming daughter. "She's not having a tantrum," Sabrina said softly, kneeling beside Chiara's chair. "She just misses someone." The autumn wind whipped through Manhattan's Upper East Side, rattling the floor-to-ceiling windows of Le Ciel d'Or as if trying to break into the warmth inside. The French restaurant glowed like a jewel box against the darkening October sky, crystal chandeliers casting amber light over tables draped in pristine white linen. Sabrina Keller moved through the open kitchen with practiced precision, her blonde hair pulled into a severe bun, ice-blue eyes focused on the delicate pastries taking shape under her hands. At 29, she was Le Ciel d'Or's head pastry chef, the woman responsible for the desserts that food critics called edible poetry. Her white chef's coat was spotless, her movements economical and graceful. She piped vanilla bean creme onto paper-thin tuile cookies, each one identical to the last. Perfection was her specialty, control her comfort zone. In the kitchen, she could transform chaos into beauty, turn simple ingredients into something that made people close their eyes and remember better times. "Chef Keller," called Marcus, one of the line cooks. "The Bianchi reservation just arrived." Sabrina's hand stilled for just a moment. She'd heard whispers about tonight's special guest, Luca Bianchi, the man whose name made even the restaurant's investors speak in careful tones. Real estate mogul, they called him. Import-export businessman, the kind of euphemisms that fooled no one. Through the kitchen's glass wall, she watched him enter the dining room, tall and broad-shouldered. He moved with the controlled power of a man accustomed to command. His black hair was perfectly styled, his charcoal suit clearly custom-made, and his dark eyes swept the room with automatic assessment. But it was the small figure beside him that caught Sabrina's attention. The little girl couldn't have been more than 7, dressed in a navy blue dress with white trim, her dark hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. She walked with careful, measured steps, her small hand clasped tightly in her father's much larger one. There was something fragile about her posture, the way she held herself, as if she might break at any moment. Chiara Bianchi. Sabrina had heard the staff whispering about her too, the boss's daughter who'd lost her mother 2 years ago, who'd been having episodes in public places. They were seated at a corner table, partially secluded from the other diners. Sabrina watched as Luca helped his daughter into her chair, his movements careful and gentle despite his intimidating presence. The contrast struck her, this man who could probably destroy lives with a phone call, treating his child like she was made of spun glass. The waiter approached their table with menus, his smile bright and professional. Sabrina watched him lean down to speak to Chiara, probably offering the children's menu or suggesting the mac and cheese. That's when everything changed. The waiter's friendly gesture, reaching toward Chiara with a colorful kids' menu, seemed to trigger something in the child. Her small body went rigid, Her breathing became rapid and shallow. She stared at the empty chair across from her, the chair where her mother should have been sitting, and something inside her snapped. The scream that erupted from Kiara's throat was unlike anything Sabrina had ever heard. It wasn't anger or defiance. It was pure, raw anguish. The sound of a heart breaking in real time. Every conversation in the restaurant stopped. Silverware froze halfway to mouths. The pianist's fingers stumbled on the keys. All eyes turned toward the corner table where Luca Bianchi's daughter was falling apart in front of Manhattan's elite. Luca shot to his feet, his chair scraping against the marble floor. He reached for Kiara, his face a mask of controlled panic, but she recoiled from his touch as if it burned. The more he tried to calm her, the louder she screamed, her small hands pressed against her ears as if trying to block out the entire world. "Kiara, please!" Luca's voice was barely audible over her cries, but Sabrina caught the desperation in it. This wasn't the voice of a man used to being obeyed. This was a father watching his child drown and not knowing how to save her. Security guards materialized from the shadows, their hands hovering near concealed weapons. Other diners began to murmur, some looking annoyed, others sympathetic but helpless. The maître d' approached cautiously, clearly torn between his duty to maintain the restaurant's atmosphere and his fear of offending Luca Bianchi. Behind the kitchen's glass wall, Sabrina felt her own hands begin to shake. She knew that scream, had made that sound herself more times than she could count. It was the cry of a child who'd lost something irreplaceable, who didn't understand why the world kept spinning when her own had stopped completely. That's when Sabrina made a decision that would change everything. She untied her apron, set down her pastry bag, and walked toward the kitchen door. Several staff members stared at her in shock. No one approached Luca Bianchi uninvited, especially not during a family crisis. But Sabrina had spent her childhood being that screaming child, and she'd learned something that all the psychiatrists and social workers had missed,